They served me tea in a plastic cup at my own son's dinner table. Everyone else had porcelain. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to. That plastic cup told me everything about where I stood in this house I had built with my own hands. My name doesn't matter much in this story. What matters is that I raised a son named Farhan alone, after his mother passed when he was 11. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, so he could go to a good school, then a good college, then start a good life. When he got married to Sana 4 years ago, I gave them the top floor of my house to live in. No rent, no conditions. I only asked for one thing: respect, the kind that costs nothing but means everything. For the first year things were warm. Sana called me Abba and meant it. Farhan would sit with me in the evenings and ask about my day. Then their daughter, little Ariba, was born, and slowly, quietly, like water finding cracks in a wall, things began to change. It started small. My chair by the window, the one I'd sat in every evening for 15 years, became in the way when they rearranged the living room for the baby's playmat. My old routine of eating dinner with the family became optional, then forgotten, then simply not mentioned anymore. I began eating alone in the kitchen while laughter drifted down from upstairs. I didn't complain. I told myself this was normal, that young families needed space, that grandfathers should not be too demanding. But there is a difference between giving space and being erased. One evening, I overheard Sana on the phone with her sister. "He just sits there all day," she said, laughing lightly. "Doesn't work. Doesn't contribute anything. Honestly, I don't know how Farhan's going to manage when he gets older and needs more care." I stood in the hallway, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold in my hands, and said nothing. I went back to my room and sat in the dark for a long time. The dinner with the plastic cup happened 2 weeks later. Farhan's business partner and his wife had come over. Successful people, the kind Farhan wanted to impress. Sana had brought out the good china, the embroidered tablecloth, the silver spoons from her mother's dowry. When it was my turn to be served, she handed me tea in a cheap plastic cup with a small crack along the rim. "Sorry, Abba, we ran out of the good cups," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I counted the cups on the table. There were exactly enough for everyone, including me, in porcelain. I said nothing. I drank my tea from the plastic cup and smiled at the guests when they spoke to me, because that is who I am. I do not perform my pain for an audience. But that night, lying awake, I made a decision. I would not fight. I would not shout. I would simply watch and wait and let time do what time always does. Reveal the truth. The following weeks brought more of the same, dressed in politeness. My opinions on Ariba's upbringing were old-fashioned. My offer to help with grocery money was met with an awkward laugh from Farhan. "Abba, you don't need to worry about that anymore. We've got it covered." As if my money wasn't good enough to spend on my own granddaughter. Once, I heard Farhan tell a neighbor, almost apologetically, "My father never really had much of a career, you know. Just factory work most of his life. We try to take care of him. Factory work." That was the phrase he used. As if 32 years of my life could be folded into 2 dismissive words. What Farhan did not know, what nobody in that house knew, was that I had not spent those 32 years simply working a factory floor. I had spent the last 18 of them as a silent partner in that very factory. After the original owner, a man named Rashid, who had no children of his own, made me an offer I never told anyone about. "You show up every day like it's your own," he told me once, "so let it become your own." I bought in slowly, quietly, through every raise and every bonus I never spent on myself. When Rashid passed 8 years ago, his share came to me, as we'd agreed in a private contract his lawyer still held. I owned 40% of that factory. I had never touched most of the profits. I let them sit, reinvested, growing untouched, because I never needed much, and because some part of me always suspected I might need proof one day. Proof that silence is not the same as weakness. I told no one. Not out of pride, but because I wanted to know, truly know, who my family was when they believed I had nothing. Now I had my answer, cup by plastic cup. The final piece of the tension arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, in the form of a phone call from Farhan, sounding tense in a way I hadn't heard before. "Abba, I need to talk to you tonight. It's important. It's about the house." That evening, Farhan and Sana sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten so many meals alone. Farhan's hands were folded tightly. "Abba, we've been thinking," he began, "and honestly, with Ariba getting older, we need more space. This house is old. It's small for what we need now. We found a buyer, a good price. We want to sell the house and move to a bigger place, closer to my office." "And where would I go?" I asked quietly. Sana looked away. Farhan cleared his throat. "There's a place, Sunrise Residency. It's a very respectable senior living facility, Abba. They have doctors on site, activities, everything. It's actually quite nice. You'd be comfortable there. A senior living facility. My son wanted to sell the roof over my head and place me in a facility so that he and his wife could have a bigger house." I looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, with something closer to grief. "This house is in my name, Farhan," I said gently. "You cannot sell what isn't yours." His face changed. "Abba, please, don't make this difficult. We've already found a buyer. We just need your signature." "No," I said. "Just that. No raised voice. No accusation. Just the truth, spoken calmly." Sana's composure cracked. "You've never had to think about anyone but yourself, have you? Do you know what it's like? Living on Farhan's salary alone, trying to raise a child properly, while you just sit here doing nothing, contributing nothing? We've carried this whole house on our backs, and you can't even give us this one thing?" I let her finish. I did not interrupt. When she was done, I stood up slowly from the table. "Come with me," I said. "Both of you. Tomorrow morning. There's something I should have shown you a long time ago." They exchanged a confused glance but agreed, more out of exhaustion than curiosity. The next morning, I took them to Rashid Textiles, the factory on the edge of town where I had spent 32 years of my life. Farhan had driven past this building 100 times without a second thought. I walked them past the front gate, past the workers who greeted me not as an old employee, but as "Sir," with a respect that visibly startled my son. straight into the front office, where the current general manager, a young man named Bilal, stood up immediately when he saw me. "Sir, good morning. Is everything all right? You don't usually come in on Wednesdays. Bilal, please pull the ownership documents. I want my son to see them." Bilal returned moments later with a folder. Farhan opened it with visibly shaking hands. His eyes moved across the page, then moved again, as if rereading would change what was written there. 40% ownership. My name, printed clearly, alongside profit statements that made his salary look modest by comparison. "Abba," he whispered, This is real?" "For 18 years," I said quietly. "I never touched most of it. I let it grow. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to love me for who I was to you, not for what I had. And for a long time, Farhan, that was enough for me. Watching you build your own life, thinking your father had nothing to give you but old advice. I was proud of you for trying to stand on your own feet." Sana had gone pale, silent for the first time in weeks. "But somewhere along the way," I continued, "you both forgot that a man can have very little money and still deserve a porcelain cup. Respect was never about what I owned. It was about who I am. And that you took from me for months, believing I had nothing to give back." Farhan sat down slowly in the office chair, his face in his hands. "Abba, I'm so sorry. I said such terrible things to people about you. I called it factory work like it was nothing. I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," I said. "You needed to respect me either way. That was the test you failed. Not because of what you didn't know, but because of what you assumed." There was a long silence in that office. Then Sana, quietly, tears finally falling, said, "The teacup that night. I've thought about that 100 times since. I told myself it didn't matter. It mattered. I'm sorry, Abba. I truly am. I did not gloat. I did not raise my voice in triumph. I simply nodded, because an apology given honestly deserves to be received with grace, not victory." In the months that followed, things did not become perfect overnight. Real healing rarely does, but it became honest. Farhan started coming down for dinner again, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. Sana began asking my opinion on Ariba's upbringing, and actually listening to the answer. Nobody mentioned Sunrise Residency again. I never sold the house. I never needed to prove anything more than I already had. What I gave Farhan, eventually, was not my ownership papers or my bank statements. Those I kept quietly for myself, as I always had. What I gave him was the lesson his mother and I always tried to teach him, long before either of us had anything worth counting. That the measure of a man is not in what he owns, but in how he treats the people who have nothing to offer him but themselves. Sometimes, late in the evening, I still sit by that same window, in that same old chair, which Sana moved back for me without my ever asking. Ariba climbs into my lap now most nights, and I tell her stories, not about factories or money, but about patience, about silence, about waiting for the truth to reveal itself, instead of shouting to be believed. And every single evening since, my tea comes to me in a porcelain cup.